Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest of our community conversations. We're doing these online. You may have been used to sitting around in large church halls, but obviously current events are preventing us from doing that. So we're taking to the data streams to give you some information and to get questions from you about things that the council is doing in your area. Tonight, we are focusing on Teddington, Hampton Wick, and Fulwell and Hampton Hill wards. My name is Gareth Roberts. I am the leader of the council and I am the chair for the evening. However, apart from bits and links like this, I don't expect to be saying all that much. The questions you will have will almost certainly be for your ward councillors. However, I'm existing a bit like that new lifeline that they have on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, where they can ask the host for prompts and hints and tips on anything which they may get stuck on. However, as we have such an experienced and knowledgeable group of councillors on the call this evening, they won't need my assistance. So I'm going to quickly run through the rules of the event for you. First and foremost, this is all really quite dry and dull, but we have to do it. The event is being recorded and will be published after the event on the council website. All attendees other than the panel are muted. If you wish to have a chance to ask a question, there is a chat function. Now, this is really important. If you can just write the word question in the chat function, don't write the whole thing, because it's, you'd do a lot of typing. Just write the word question, and then when we get to the question and answer session, I will go through the chat and look for that person. If there's lots and lots of comments going on, then sometimes, and this has happened a couple of times before, then I miss somebody and they get terribly shirty about the idea that they're being silenced in some way, which is not the intention of the evening. So if you just write question, and I will be able to find you. When it's your turn to speak, you will be unmuted. If you can turn your video camera on as well, that would be immensely helpful, because it gives a certain immediacy, and live action feed footage is nice. So please do try to do that. Again, don't use the chat for having questions between you. If you can try and keep your questions brief, that would be lovely. No huge statements, so brief questions, because then we can get through as many as we can. And everybody has been sent the event etiquette. And I'm sure that we won't need to rely on the event etiquette. However, we do have the equivalent of internet bouncers on this event this evening, who, if there are people being a bit shirty in the chat, or generally misbehaving or using profanities, and we did have it, but it was for Twickenham, so you expect it. The Twickenham, I'm going to get so much trouble for that. The Twickenham one, we did have people using all sorts of effing, but we can't have that, ladies and gentlemen. And the bouncers will move in if that sort of thing goes on. After the event, we will be emailing you all with details about the information which was shared with you, the presentations, and general information, hints and tips, and of course the contact details of all of the ward councillors who have taken part. So that brings us very neatly to the ward councillors. This evening we have Councillor Jonathan Cardy, Councillor Matthew Hull, and Councillor Monica Saunders representing Fulwell and Hampton Hill. We have Councillor Robin Brown and Councillor Jim Millard representing Hampton Wick. You may have heard that we have had a resignation on the council, so if you were expecting to see Councillor Baxendale this evening, he is now Mr. Baxendale. He is no longer on the council. And we have for Teddington, Councillors Martin Ellengorn and Councillor Tim Woodcock. Councillor Richard Baker is at another meeting, so can't attend this evening. So we are very shortly going to have a presentation which is going to give you some insight into how the council has been operating and the work which we have been doing over the last few weeks. When I did the voiceover for it, I thought it was lively, positive, dynamic and engaging. However, it is really, to be honest, leaden. So please, bear with it. Bear with it. And if I get the chance, I will re-record it at some point in the future. I should have said, I've noticed him, we have Councillor Piers Allen, who is on the call and is ready to take questions and give assistance if the matter of Ellery Hall pops up. So, with that enticing prospect of a leaden, dry delivery over a video, I suggest that we run VT. Thank you.
The first half of 2020 has been an extraordinary period for all of us. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a profound impact on all our lives. The Council has not been immune. The pandemic has brought huge challenges to us and to the way in which we deliver services to residents. Throughout the whole period, we have been committed to providing key services to all residents and help to those who need it most. As a snapshot of some of the things we achieved in just the first month of lockdown alone, we provided more than 6,000 hours of home care. We provided social care for over 1,600 vulnerable adults. We answered over 2,000 calls to our community hub. We provided 47 rough sleepers with accommodation. We delivered over 500 books directly to residents from our libraries and saw a 365% increase in people using our online library services. We had over 42,000 views of our online sports classes. We collected an estimated 47 tonnes of waste and recycling every day. And we kept our 51 schools open, providing education for over 500 children of key workers and vulnerable families. We know that things haven't always been perfect, and many people have been frustrated by some of the lockdown measures that have been put in place, and the fact that some of our services had to stop to ensure the safety of residents and staff. But we've been committed to prioritising those most in need. During this challenging period, I have been blown away by the continued incredible community spirit that we have seen across the borough. The pandemic has brought out the very best in so many of our residents, with neighbours providing a helping hand, the weekly clap for our carers and frontline workers, residents donating to food banks, and the general willingness of so many to go above and beyond in their support for members of our communities. Following a call for volunteers, Richmond CVS received a staggering 3,000 applications from residents eager to help in any way they could. We have seen groups delivering food parcels, setting up virtual fitness classes, checking up on elderly residents that are shielding, and collecting prescriptions. This generosity from residents and local groups has been genuinely humbling. And as we look to the future and towards recovery, we know that there are still huge challenges ahead. The recovery period provides us with an opportunity to make environmental changes that are needed across the borough, and we have already started implementing some of these. For example, we have already started with our post-COVID-19 highway recovery strategy, looking at how we can ensure social distancing, encourage walking and cycling, and ensure our children can get to school safely. Over the next few weeks and months, we will be looking at other ways we can support local communities. And of course, residents will need to play their part in the future as they have done over the last few months. We've worked hard to ensure that businesses have received the funding they're entitled to, awarding a total of £35.79 million to over 2,100 local businesses. But now as our high streets begin to reopen, we all need to make sure that we support our local shops. Many of our businesses are run by local people, and if we don't use them, we will lose them. As we emerge from this difficult period and look towards recovery, we want residents to come on board and provide us with their thoughts and ideas on how we can create a better borough for all of our residents. This moment provides the Council with an opportunity to reflect and improve the way we work and engage with residents, and your support and ideas are key to that. Thank you for coming this evening, and I look forward to hearing from you all.
Okay, so there we have it. So what the Council has been up to over the last few months, delivering services for you at all time. Now, what we are going to do here is go to a ward roundup, specific ward issues, which are going to be tackled by each of the ward members. Now, to help me, because I can forget things quite easily, they've kindly arranged this in alphabetical order. So we're going to go straight to Councillor Robin Brown, who's going to give an update on behalf of the Hampton Wick Ward Councillors.
Thank you, Gareth, and hello everyone. And it was interesting seeing that video. It's quite hard in some ways to remember back to what it was like in that really fraught time when lockdown was just kicking in. So the first thing I wanted to say was we had just such a great response locally from people. We had WhatsApp groups springing up everywhere in Hampton Wick. We had many people looking to volunteer. We had local groups organising to help people who are vulnerable in our ward. So we had Ben and his team at the Anglers, which ended up lots of people volunteering and helping with Crossroads. We've had obviously the Teddington and Hampton Wick Voluntary Care Group, continuing expanding their good work. We've got Raid and Rules based in our area. I was keeping in touch with the churches who were also helping. So much help and support to anybody locally, which is great to see. And probably a bit of an outbreak of community spirit as well. If other roads are anything like my road, which is Munster Road, suddenly everyone's on a WhatsApp group, and whereas probably originally that was all intended to be helping people with shopping and helping people who needed it in our area, which is still happening. It's heartening to see that it's made lots of new connections, I think, and lots of people are now using that WhatsApp group to exchange information, what's going on. People are helpfully selling masks that they're making that we've been buying. That was good to see. Good to see on VE Day people out able to get out and bit on the streets and have a chat to each other. It's been very busy, I think, out and about on the streets. So lots of cycling and walking going on. That's made it very busy in certain areas. So the towpath and barge walk has been really, really busy. Home Park and particularly Bushy Park likewise. And I know for some people that's a bit of a challenge. The streets in Hampton Wick are quite narrow, and I know some people are finding it a bit worrying now that things are opening up, a bit harder to get out and about and walk around. So whilst there's been some measures taking place elsewhere, certainly I know some people here are finding it a bit of a challenge to get out and about, but we do want to encourage active travel as much as we can. I was pleased to be able to help get the skate park back open as quickly as possible on the King's Field. So we made sure we got the council staff back in quickly. There was some antisocial behaviour developing there. We got the council staff back in, opened the skate park up at the same time as the rest of the parks opened up. So that was good to see. One or two things have been a bit delayed. So the Bullen Hall project is probably proceeding a bit more slowly than we'd hoped. The Hampton Wick Association are busy trying to work with the council on moving that forward. But inevitably that's been a bit delayed. And the Collis School rebuild, whilst it's still going on and all the deliveries are still taking place, again, that's been impacted. The work's progressing more slowly. All the units that were being delivered from Dublin to help that school build happen have come across a bit less completed than would have been the original plan. What else? I guess the impact on businesses has been quite varied. Hopefully a lot of people have had the support funds from the council quite quickly, but some of our pubs, for example, were a bit big to get the actual grants from the government. And I know that the Lion and the Foresters, for example, I talked to the guys there, they've really been struggling through this. So hopefully the Rishi Eat Out to Help Out will help a bit with that. I think probably it's just in Teddington, but just to mention with things being very busy, I think there's been quite an issue. We might want to talk about it down at Teddington Lock. So Gareth and I were on a call recently trying to think about what we can do down there, how we can make swimming safer. We really, really can't encourage people jumping off Teddington Lock footbridge, but it's difficult to know how we can police that permanently. The police have been down quite a bit to help out. Councillor Baker's been involved in trying to look at what can be done. The police put a dispersal order on there recently. We understand people want to get out and about and enjoy the river and enjoy the good weather, but some aspects of behaviour have been dangerous for people, and we've been trying to think as a council on what we can do to support that or help deal with that. Two other things to mention: Udney Park. It's been great in some ways to see informal usage of Udney Park during this. I mean, whether deliberately or not, Quantum seem to have left the gate open and we've had a lot of people out on the park. But as local councillors, we're quite worried about the condition of Udney Park. It seems to be deteriorating. We know that the local sports clubs aren't going to be able to play there from September onwards, as far as at least that's what we've heard so far. And we really don't want to see Udney Park fall into disrepair and not be being used for purposes it was intended. So we've written to Quantum about that. And the other thing we might want to talk about is the trial closure of Bushy Park. So Bushy Park is now open to traffic to come in and use the car parks again, or it will be shortly, I think it is now. But the parks have said that it's still closed to through traffic. and they intend to trial for a period of 6 months when things are back to normal, keeping the park closed to traffic, which we can understand from the point of view of the benefit to users of the park, and it makes it a quieter and more amenable green space. But we're a bit concerned about the impact of that on the other local roads and the pressure of traffic it pushes on to Sandy Lane, for example. So we're going to have to keep a close eye on that one. Probably gone on long enough. That's Hampton Wick. Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you so much. And now we move to Councillor Ellengorn, who will pick up the last scraps from that very full.
I was just thinking, I try not to repeat anything Robin has said, but perhaps I can just say the context of what he said about Uttley Park was, of course, the appeal by Quantum was lost. The inspector did exactly what we expected he'd do and said that their proposal was entirely against policy, developing on green land and diminishing the sports provision. And so they lost, and now the ball is very much in their court. Other things in terms of planning, which perhaps, well, a bit of good news is that the lifts at Teddington Station have got planning permission now, but unfortunately there's a problem about getting that little bit of land with a shed on to detach it from the owner, which is the adjacent closed nursery, and Network Rail may have to use compulsory purchase powers. Lots of toing and froing about banks. Lloyds Bank has now got planning permission for a combined social and educational use, and the new lettering to be put over that wonderful little dome is with the planners, and it's going to be the same typeface, if you like, as Lloyds, but of course it will say something different, which is awesome, which perhaps Lloyds were never awesome. The HSBC, the horrible little building on the corner of Cedar Road, a rather overlarge proposal for housing and a restaurant were turned down because it was just too big and waited here. And of course, the latest, very recent news is that Barclays Bank are closing in November. Now, fortunately, after a lot of effort, we've managed to get the best bits of Church Road and the Causeway and Broad Street into a conservation area. So that very fine building, which up to until November will be Barclays Bank, will be saved. For what use, we don't know, but the government has liberalised various aspects of the planning regime. And from the 1st of September, things like Barclays Bank could open the next day as a restaurant. We're working through all the significance of these changes, and we'll be meeting both MPs tomorrow to talk about it. I should mention on Heathrow, which is of much interest to everybody, that the appeal court throughout the government's airports policy, the major factor of which was, of course, the third runway, but Heathrow have now taken the case to the Supreme Court, so we have to wait and see. Perhaps two other things to say very briefly. The Ellery Hall Reprovision proposal has moved forward to through the Adult Services Committee. We have Councillor Allen here to answer any questions on that. And finally, the results of the controlled parking consultation carried out in the spring are about to be published. They're not public yet, but essentially many of the streets not in controlled parking have asked to be in controlled parking, and the ward councillors from more than just Teddington ward will be coming together with the highways people to see what we do next.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Now we move to Councillor Saunders. Monica Saunders is going to give us Fulwell and Hampton Hill.
Okay, thank you, Gareth, and good evening, everyone. Yes, obviously the CPZ is something that will also involve Fulwell and Hampton Hill residents. So thank you, Martin, for alluding to that. I think one of the main things that was happening during this COVID time, the biggest issue for us, not surprisingly, has been rubbish, litter and fly tipping, which has filled our email inboxes, and it's an ongoing problem, and I know it's an issue across the borough. Sadly, it's also been an issue in Bushy Park. The first day after the bank holiday in May, when I think people were allowed to be outside in slightly large groups, Bushy Park on the Tuesday was an absolute, I mean, it was appalling. There were plastic carrier bags hanging from trees, full of rubbish, I mean, it was just appalling. I've actually done a letter. More recently, the coffee house is outside the pheasantry is also pretty bad. I think to begin with, our main issue during certainly the first month or so, which was the busiest time when there was a lot of information coming out from the council about arrangements for so many different things, was to actually liaise with as many people in our own ward as far as we could with the email addresses that we had. So certainly keeping our town centre manager, Georgia, Hampton Hill Association, churches, residents associations, but obviously individual residents for whom we had emails, and we knew in particular those who lived alone, who do live alone, that they were kept up to date on what was happening with the council. What came out of that really, so I want to thank Linda, who I know is here, and Georgia particularly. But I think what came out of that there was clearly some businesses who weren't covered by the various packages, financial packages that were available through the government's various different sources of funding. And in some of the cases, I mean, it wasn't huge, but in some of the cases, obviously, we weren't as really able to help other than push that information up so that it could be taken through to our MPs to raise in the House of Commons, and because there's still people who obviously fall through the gaps. The other key things that have been happening, we've had some antisocial behaviour in Hampton Hill, the Hampton Hill end of Bushy Park, which I think people have been aware of, which actually triggered a change in times of opening Bushy Park in the mornings. And there was a lot of to and froing at the start of that. But and then the people who were, sort of mostly the causes of that antisocial behaviour transferred to Holly Road recreational ground. But I think that's now settled down. We kept in touch with our local safe neighbourhood team. The other issues, I partly picked these up personally because of my other sort of the hats that I wear in various forms. And there's been issues of real excessive speeding on our roads across the borough during lockdown. I've kept in touch with the traffic police on that score, and obviously in our ward we know that there's been some real speeding problems on Hampton Road, Wellington Road and Stanley Road. Yeah, those are the key things that have been happening. We were at the beginning of starting some things just before lockdown, which have just had to be put into abeyance, but hopefully we'll be able to resurrect shortly. One of which was actually aiming to bring traders, residents and councillors together in Hampton Hill. We had a first meeting just before lockdown, I guess, which was really intended to think about what things we could do to improve the high street between us, so a really collaborative effort. And I'd like to think that we could reinstate that and expand it. As councillors also, we've become interested in, and I know that there's others out there who know that I'm involved with this outside of being a councillor, in trying to identify the potential for community gardens in our ward. So those are the main things I think we've been looking at. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all of those updates. I've only got one question in the chat at the moment, and that's been sent to me privately, so I will have to keep your intent hooked for the time being, but do start thinking about the questions which you may have. Otherwise, this is going to be a short old evening, because we've got one more video to come, and it is going to be an absolute textbook example of how a video should be given a voiceover. We are now going to find out all about the Richmond Community Fund, featuring the dulcet tones of Councillor Jim Millard. Ladies and gentlemen, Councillor Millard, please roll the tape.
new £180,000 fund has been launched to help support community-led projects in every ward in the borough, helping to rebuild local areas and connect communities after the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. The £10,000 pot for each ward is intended to support local initiatives, helping launch new ideas and developing projects to make a positive difference to our borough. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a widespread impact on how we deliver services and support local people. We welcome all ideas on how to improve your local area, particularly those that aim to help rebuild our communities, connecting people and finding new ways of supporting each other. Any individual, local group, charity or business can submit an idea or apply for a grant. Applications need to demonstrate how the project meets one or more of the following priorities. Enable local people to develop, agree and deliver their own responses to local issues and build stronger communities. Make public places more attractive, enjoyable and distinctive. Support local initiatives that address the causes of climate change and minimise the environmental impact of carbon, waste and pollution to protect the future of our borough and our planet. Promote the vitality of our town and neighbourhood centres. Widen participation in sports and physical activity. Enhance the artistic and cultural offer and protect the borough's heritage. Improve health and well-being. Improve crime prevention. Improve community assets. Before you apply, you will need to discuss your idea with your ward councillor to see how it fits with local priorities. You can do this by sharing your idea online or contacting your ward councillors directly. And then, your idea will be reviewed by ward councillors and officers to recommend next steps for your idea. This may include an application to the local area fund, but could also include signposting you to another source of support or funding for your idea. If the idea is suitable for the local area fund, we will invite you to submit a formal application. Once a complete application has been submitted, it will then be reviewed and we'll let you know if it has been successful. We look forward to hearing from you.
See, told you it was much better than mine. We will, of course, be giving Councillor Millard's spotlight details with his contact details at the end. So now is the time that you have all been waiting, which is to move directly to the questions from you, the public. So here we are. We have a question from Heather Hamer. She wants to know what's happening around the Crown Flag building on Teddington High Street and the concern that the place is becoming an area where visitors are approached by evangelists. I appreciate this is something relatively new. So who wants to take on, is that Councillor Ellengorn? Excellent.
Yes, there's been a lot of concern about this and I have been in touch with the Vicar of Teddington and others, and Councillor Baker has been in touch with the police to at least tip them off. Clearly, it is an evangelical initiative, and as has been said, people are asked in and are given coffee, and there are religious conversations. There have been concerns about safeguarding, and we've alerted our safeguarding team, so they are aware of that. We've looked into the planning aspects, but partly because of the liberalisation, if that's the word, of planning that takes effect on the 1st of September, as far as we can see, they will be operating within the relevant high street use class. And also the new display in the window doesn't require planning permission. But we are very much keeping a watch on this because we know people are concerned.
Okay, does anybody have, any of the other councillors have something they wish to add, or should we move straight on? Okay, we will now move to P. Barnes. P. Barnes, question.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, I'd like.
Not at all.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. Can you? Sorry, I thought I had unmuted. Yes, it's a question regarding Udney Park playing fields. Councillor Ellengorn mentioned that Quantum's appeal to build well over 100 luxury flats on these playing fields was roundly rejected by the inspector, and quite rightly so. There was an offer made at the public inquiry by a philanthropist who was interested in purchasing the fields at their playing field value, but there has been to date no sign of the owners, Quantum, being remotely interested in selling. Now, given COVID-19 and the lockdown, the open space and particularly green fields mean an awful lot more to everybody. We all have, appreciated how important they are. I think Councillor Robin Broom was talking about Home Park and Bushy Park and the particular use they have had. Now, Udney Park is actually one of the council's own playing fields, strategic playing fields in their strategic playing field review. Given the persistent refusal of the owner to engage, surely now is the time to acquire the fields, for the council to acquire the fields by exercising their compulsory purchase powers.
Okay.
And can you confirm that the council will do so, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, right. Councillor Ellery, and I think Councillor Brown will want to say something as well.
Yeah, I think Robin will probably, as it's actually in his ward, will have most to say. But there has been the proposal has come to the council for us to consider compulsory purchase powers, and that is with our solicitors at the moment who are studying it.
Thank you. Robin.
Well, I mean, I agree with most of what's been said, particularly about the value of the playing fields during the lockdown. It's been great to see them being used. Obviously, we'll see them being used in the right way. We've had at least one incident where the police have been called, so we don't want to see them becoming a sort of focal point for antisocial behaviour. And I think it links back to the fact that what we really want to see them used for is for sport. They're playing fields. So I think if they get good regular usage, that will help to deter the wrong kind of usage, and that's what they were originally donated for. We've as local councillors, we've written to Quantum to express that point of view. I have to report back that I've not had a response or even an acknowledgement from Quantum yet of that letter, sadly. I think as far as the council's powers are concerned, there's a limited amount we can do. Obviously, if vegetation gets obstructive to the footway or overgrows the boundaries, we can require that to be cut back. Compulsory purchase powers is going to be looked at, as Martin said. It's there's quite a high hurdle to using that power. Typically used in sort of big regeneration projects where you're trying to unlock a particular piece of land. So it's going to be looked at, but these things can be legally quite complex as to whether that power is appropriate to use and when. So I can't really comment on where that sort of view might come back from the legal team.
Of course, there is always a third way, and that is that we just made an open market offer for the land at the price that Quantum would want to pay, which is how private property law is supposed to work. But I guess that would be a much higher price than any CPO at playing field value.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that Quantum paid somewhere between 5 and 6 million. That's what I've got in my head. Someone might be able to correct me who knows better. And I think the playing field value that's being quoted is somewhere between 1 and 1.5. So you can see there's a very big value gap there, and it's something that if I put my other hat on as being the finance lead for the council. So I've got my ward council hat, but I've also got a local finance hat for the council. Coming up with the odd sort of spare 4 or 5 million down the back of the sofa is a bit of a tricky thing at the moment, particularly after the financial impact of the council
you could see why Quantum would, having paid 5 or 6 million, wouldn't be terribly interested in an offer of 1.5 million. So you can see why, in their defence, that wouldn't be attractive. So.
Yes, but I think that we also need to bear in mind the fact that they're speculative developers. They paid 6 million for it, which I understand was at least double the nearest offer from a sports user.
Well, it's free market, mate. Buyers and sellers can pay what they like, don't they?
There is, of course, yes, and in fact, there's an overage clause on it as well, so they have to pay another $1 million if they get planning permission on an acre. And of course, there is precedent for the council actually exercising CPO powers, because they did exactly the same for Buckingham Fields when they CPO'd the fields there. So that there is a precedent there. The value of the fields is probably somewhere between 50,000 to 100,000 an acre, which puts their sports playing field value at about 600,000 to about 1.2 million. Now, if you speculate, things, as I say, the value can go up as well as down, and perhaps Quantum need to appreciate that this is one of the speculations where the value has gone down. So do I understand from this that the only impediment to CPOing it is the legal report from your solicitors?
Well, it's a legal opinion, and also then officers would have to come forward with a view that would have to be considered by the council, because clearly any kind of CPO process is bound to be time consuming, probably cost quite a bit of money to pursue. It would be hard to predict exactly where it would end up, I suspect. But let's not prejudge what comes back.
Okay, thank you very much for your question, Mr. Barnes. Thank you. Right, we are going to move to Sarah Leff, who has a question about one of the hot topics of the day.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hello, hi. I'm a boat owner. I own a boat at Teddington Harbour, and I spend quite a lot of time down there. There's a lot of antisocial behaviours, I'm sure everyone knows, and a lot of damage to our property as well. Our boat cover has been torn, and I've seen children kicking other pieces of equipment off of other boats. There seems to be just a huge sort of party there every single time the sun is out. And I was just wondering what your plans are to kind of mitigate the risks for boat owners, but also for the general public who are just trying to enjoy their time there and not be involved in a massive party.
Okay. Now, the person who's been leading a lot on this is Councillor Baker, and but he's not here this evening. But I'm sure that the other councillors here will be able to give you some information, and if not, this may be one of the times when they use their lifeline, because I've also been involved. Who fancies us?
Shall I start?
Yeah.
It is actually, because of the way the geography works, this is of concern also to the other side of the river, and the lock itself is actually in the Environment Agency's, sorry, in Hammond Petersham Ward. But as you know, there's been a dispersal order from the police, which has operated over the weekend. The Environment Agency, who own the lock, are very much involved, and we're all watching the situation. But I think I'll probably stop there and let Gareth perhaps say a little bit more, as he's the law and order man of the council.
Do any other councillors want to come in with their view before I jump in?
You go ahead, Gareth. I mean, it's
okay.
Yeah, go on.
Thank you. We're having a meeting with the Environment Agency and police on site on Friday. I spoke with Chief Superintendent Sally Benatar only earlier today and made the case for having another dispersal zone, because we look as though we're going to be having another hot weekend, which will be acting as a magnet to young people. I've currently got a senior officer within the council and the office and the councillor's senior legal advisors. I'm advising as to whether we could put in place CCTV footage so that we can capture stills of the young people diving off, and look to whether we can, as a council, publish those pictures. But obviously, it's a bit tricky because they are minors. The thing is that they will go there anyway. It's very tricky to stop them from clambering up without a permanent police or park guard presence. And the best deterrent, which I used to find when I was about that age, was that if my mother found out what I was up to, then she'd be down on me like a ton of bricks. So we would be hoping to do a sort of it's not a name and shame because we can't name them, but this sort of images of the children jumping off, and hopefully their parents will take some direct responsibility and direct action to stop the kids from going there. We're also looking as to how the structure of the bridge may be given additions to prevent climbing. Obviously, it's a Grade 2 listed structure, so there is impediments in the way of that, but it is something we're looking at. And of course, there is a new enforcement power which the police have, which is effectively, it's a special one, which is, in easy terms, it's sort of like a warning to them, so that they, and then the letter gets sent home. Again, it's this business about establishing a link between the child and home. I can control the child's behaviour. But as I say, we're pressing the police to put in place a dispersal zone this coming weekend. We will be having a meeting with the Environment Agency, myself, Councillor Baker, Ham Councillor will be in attendance, I'm sure, to find out what they can do. There is discussion being given to closing the island and to see whether that might be possible. And we're looking at physical barriers or restraints to stop the kids from clambering up there in the first place. It's something which happens every year, but it's just this year it seems to be particularly bad. And we want to make sure that we're going to take action against it. Sarah, you've been muted. I will see if I can unmute you. So if you have there you are. Does that give you?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does. I suppose it's just frustrating because I do tend to get abuse if I even speak to them about the damage that they're doing. I was physically threatened and had to call the police on Friday. It just, yeah. I mean, if something could be done to stop them from behaving in that way, it'd be great. I mean, anything really would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We're doing what we can. What we have to keep stressing, and I find this as frustrating as everybody else does, that the powers that we have are limited, and the resources that we have are limited. But we are doing what we can with those powers and those resources to try to find some resolution to the issue. Okay, so here we go. Phil would like to know a bit more about. Well, Phil, why don't you ask? If everybody can keep their questions short, then we can get through more of them. And I will try to keep all answers short too.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find out, Gareth, a little bit more about the new planning laws coming in and what the council's view is on the positives or negatives, the likely pros and cons as you guys understand it at the moment.
Okay, I could be really nasty and ask the chair of the planning committee to give us a full breakdown of his insight into the changes, or I could ask Councillor Ellingbourne to go first.
Well, I think that would be helpful, as I've had a meeting with the officers on this very subject this very morning. And if we exclude the rather bizarre two-storey additions to flats and offices, which are not likely to have much impact in this borough and also heavily protected, the main change is regarding our high streets. And just before the outbreak of the virus, Teddington's two high streets were doing extremely well. We actually had a lower vacancy rate than the previous year, and we're doing better than any other of the high streets in the borough. And of course, just before Christmas, the former Bed City opened as a sports shop. The legislation does this, that what were previously different use classes for shops, A1, financial services and banks, A2, restaurants and so on, A3, and offices have all become one use class. So one can move from one to the other without even going near the council. So that frees things up. It makes vacancies take less time to fill, but it also breaks up our attempts to keep the high street balanced. And the impact is both positive and negative. The negative side of it is people living over a shop, which they've been used to closing at 6 o'clock in the evening, but which has had no planning permission because it's been there forever. A restaurant can move in and have it open the whole time, subject to licensing. So we're watching the situation very carefully. We're meeting the two MPs tomorrow to talk it through. There's a positive side that perhaps I should mention, is that pubs have been taken out of this use class, so they're both protected as a special use, sui generis is the technical term, but also it's more difficult for something to become a pub. And hot food takeaways have also been taken out, so they're a separate use. And corner shops have become part of a new use class, so they are particularly protected. So there are pluses and minuses. And it takes effect on the 1st of September.
Okay, Jonathan, I'm sure you want to add something about the importance of the borough's ability to police planning and such like.
Well, there's a couple of things that come up with this where I'm thinking of applications we've had over the last few years. One of them is this business about additional stories on the top of buildings, and planning is one part of this, but it's also worth actually checking your leases, as I wound up advising some of your own constituents after a particular planning application, because if you have a lease on a flat in a building, then there's a very good chance that
if a developer wants to add a story or two on there, that they have to have a proper discussion with you about the alteration to the lease and some of the common property and etc. So it's not just a planning issue. There is a risk that, as with the very ill-advised scheme the government had for allowing industrial and office space to turn to other uses, to residential, we could wind up with a whole load of businesses suddenly finding that they're having to pay much higher rents or close. And as an example of how to not do things, it was a pretty powerful example. So it's worrying, and there are conditions that we've had. I can think of one of the restaurants on the high street in Teddington where when they were converted from something else into a restaurant, we were able to use planning powers to put conditions in to improve the sound insulation, or to require them to improve the sound insulation between what was now a restaurant and the flats above that. And I have a big concern that there will be people who are caught out by this and wind up with the something below them converted to a much noisier activity without the consequent increase in the sort of increase in sound insulation that we would have been insisting on through planning.
Okay, any points on this from any other councillors?
Can I just add one thing, Gareth? We are expecting later this month a further announcement from the government, which has been much heralded, and Simon Jenkins had something to say about in the Guardian today, that they're planning zones with a greater freedom on planning permission, or even no planning permission. Now, we don't think this would apply to a borough like this, but we don't know. So there may be more radical things coming along, and we must watch for that and use our MPs. This would require legislation, I believe. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons for briefing our MPs to get involved in this issue.
And I'm sure that we will have support from one of my predecessors, the Lord True, who is now a Minister of State, who used to rail like nobody's business about the imposition of national government on local decision making. So we hope to have his support. Phil, does that answer your question?
Very much. Thank you very much. That's
Not
great.
at all. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to Chris Jacob, who wishes to ask regarding access to Bushy Park. If I can remind everybody not to write lots and lots in the chat, because it makes it very difficult to spot questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Planning for the future, you asked us to consider the effects and the implications of the lockdown. I think for all of those of us who've been privileged enough to be able to use Bushy Park during the lockdown, we were struck by the peace, by the birdsong, by the supreme irony of the purity of the air in the absence of pollution, and contribution to physical and mental health. One group in particular missed out, and that was the disabled, unless they were very close to the park or lucky enough to have helpers to assist them in. That is not acceptable if we plan for the future, any future restrictions on our movement, and it's not a mark of a civilized community. So I hope that you can assure us that the Council will bear in mind the needs should we, heaven forbid, have future restrictions on access to the park. Proper provision will be made for those of us who are not so able to get into it. And looking ahead to whatever normal is normal, can we not also provide, once people are in the park, to help them up to see features like the cascade, which were promised 15 years ago, was it, when we had the funds to upgrade the park, and we were promised that disabled people would have assistance in seeing this immense improvement to the water features. Can I then finally ask that we use this new community fund to set up a group that looks locally to take ownership of this, to support the Royal Parks, and perhaps to use young people who are going to be at their wits' end in many cases, to help with enforcing and helping to make these things possible.
Okay, well, Monica Saunders, I'm sure that you have got views on access to the park.
Yeah, in terms of access and the Royal Parks are going, as I think somebody said earlier, to trial the movement for 6 months. I think it'll be going out to consultation in November, I believe. The issue really is about, and I think the whole movement strategy for the Royal Parks generally has been about through traffic rather than actually access to the park. So it's been essentially about using parks for through traffic rather than, you know, so in Bushy, obviously it's using Chestnut Avenue to go from one end to the other. And in Richmond Park, I believe the through traffic, I mean, I don't know Richmond Park well enough, but I know that the through traffic on weekdays is around, of the traffic that goes through Richmond Park, is about 97% is through traffic, and the rest of the time it's nearer 91%. So their aim as a strategy is really concentrated on through traffic rather than access. So at the moment, Bushy Park, you can actually get into the park from either end, and the road is blocked and will direct you to either the Pheasantry Cafe or the Princess Diana Cafe and parking area. So at the moment, I don't feel particularly concerned about access to the park, if that's what you're thinking, Chris. So it's mostly about getting from one end to the other.
If I can interject.
Yeah, Jonathan?
Chris, could you be a bit more specific about what the disability access is with the Cascade and the Water Gardens? Because I know that there's quite a gap between the car park and the Water Gardens, but what otherwise is the limitation on that? Is it about getting wheelchairs through the gates into the Water Gardens?
There's really double jeopardy. The distance from the Pheasantry car park up there, which was what the plans 15 years ago, whenever it was, were suggesting they bridge that. And then the second thing, more recently, they've been putting out of action the Upper Lodge car park, the upper car park, as some people call it, which at least brought people within striking distance of the water feature. So it's those two aspects.
Okay, I think the Upper Lodge car park, which is sort of halfway between the Pheasantry and the Water Gardens, that was supposed to be only for certain busy days on there. Martin might know more about the history of that one, but yes, I can see that there is a long gap between the water. There is a great distance between the Water Gardens and the nearest place where you can park with a blue badge pass. So I can understand that. Now there is a charity called Companion Cycling, which have facilities for getting all people with all sorts of disability around large parts of Bushy Park. Though I'm not sure with their devices you can actually get into the Water Gardens because the gates are quite narrow. But we do have a regular liaison meeting with Royal Parks, which I assume will be resumed once COVID-19 and so on is over. And I'm very happy to raise this issue with them on there. And I'm trying to think of the specific things that would resolve it. I'm obviously people with mobility scooters. I'm not sure if the gates are mobility scooter friendly, so that's one of the things we can raise with them, because I thinking of those, they would be difficult to get through.
I mean, it strikes me, Jonathan, that we should maybe talk to the parks about having a stakeholder meeting by Zoom, because we don't know when we're
Yes, that's a good idea.
I agree.
There's quite a few issues around Bushy Park which would be helpful for us to bring to their attention, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should be asking for a Zoom meeting. It's easy to set up, really.
It would be a pity if the community as a whole was not able to participate more in the new normal. particularly with this community fund, which is being trailed, which is very promising, so that we give the community the chance to look into what is far too big a topic for us to sort out, even, dare I say, in a Zoom meeting with the Royal Parks. I think this warrants something where we benefit so much from it. We hope that our disabled colleagues will too. Could we not consider this as an item for the community fund?
That's the beauty of the community fund, Chris, is that you can suggest anything to your councillors. I would note that it is only £10,000 per ward, so it's not apes, peacocks and ivory by any means. But then again, I mean, this is where Robin takes a light wince. 10 grand award over 18 wards, that's £180,000 out of the money that Robin likes to guard jealously. So we will do our best with the community fund, but there may be other forms of funding that we can tap in.
But certainly do submit it, and it's, you know, it's important to work through, and we can discuss it further. And it looks like the Royal Parks are going to want to do a lot more consultation and engagement work around their new ideas anyway. So we'd be very keen for them to come up to the standards that we're doing about listening and talking on Zoom, and all those sorts of meetings I think should happen.
Excellent.
I don't think we should leave out the Friends of Home and Bushy Park, who are an excellent organisation, which Chris might want to get more involved in. And I think we also have to remember it's a site of special scientific interest. And it's not just the human animals that have to be considered, but all the other species that make it so important and valuable.
Okay, I'm going to move us on. Thank you for your question, Chris, and I'm sure it will be picked up on by email with your ward councillors. So we are now going to go to Mr. Wardle. Roger Wardle has a question which everybody will have an opinion on: waste collection.
Yes, unfortunate timing with this sort of contracts swap over around this sort of beginning of lockdown and the refuse collection. But it's really, and I've spoken to a number of neighbours and people around Teddington who've had the same problem, but as we have on Queen's Road. But the bins are often being half emptied. A poor job is being done actually emptying the bins. The sort of recycling buckets are sort of haphazardly emptied, and when stuff comes out of them, it's not picked up off the streets outside the pavements. As a result, it encourages the foxes even more, but also kind of ends up with residents having to clean outside their front driveways and on the streets quite regularly. I'm wondering what you're going to do about that.
Can I just ask, Queen's Road Teddington or Queen's Road Hampton Hill?
Queen's Road Teddington. Yeah, but I would say all the way, the people I've seen, it's been Park Lane, Park Road, and all that area behind Tesco.
This is no consolation to you, Mr. Wardle, but this is an issue across the borough. So that your pain is shared. Yeah. So I know that Martin will want to come in on this because he used to be chair of the environment. But I would like to perhaps offer the opportunity for any other councillor who wishes to jump in with a thought before that. Martin. Oh, Monica.
Sorry. No,
Yes,
I was going to raise, I mean, we have had exactly the same problems in Fulwell and Hampton Hill, including fly tipping at the recycling units as well. And one of the things that's been suggested, and I don't know how realistic this is partly because when food waste hasn't been picked up on time, that foxes are actually able to get into and damage the food waste recycling, the actual boxes themselves. And I don't know how realistic this is whether there's kind of fox-proof food waste boxes out there on the market, because I think that, you know, that probably doesn't help.
It kind of feels anyway. Like solving the wrong problem, doesn't it?
Yes.
The issue is really kind of...
Yeah, I know. But just even if you put it out, some people put their boxes out quite early or even the night before and they're attacked. So anyway, yeah, it's not the real problem. But...
Okay, Martin. Thank you, Monica.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, the first thing I'd say is that I've now swapped places with my Vice Chair of the Environment Committee, and Julia Watts is younger, more energetic than me, and she has thrown herself into it. She's also a member of the West London Waste Authority, so she's been sharing experience with all other boroughs who've had much the same problems in terms of the increased amount of waste we have faced since lockdown, particularly on recycling. So that's one of the problems for the collectors, who, by the way, are the same people as before, but with a different management. The operatives are the same as before. They're not necessarily the same ones in the same roads. I think it would be helpful always to report these problems to us, because quite honestly, we've had quite few reports from Teddington about problems, and the more vociferous parts of the borough had much more to say. But we're working hard at it, and we've, if you like, our patience is exhausted in that we were tolerant towards the contractor early on, and indeed the senior manager was the same one as before for Veolia, but we now are somewhat losing our patience and are being a lot tougher with them. So, and one of the concerns early on was we thought most of, a considerable portion of the staff would be ill or not turning up, and this hasn't happened. They've been very good, really, and they have coped with increased volume of waste. But sometimes the supervision hasn't been great, and we are addressing it energetically. But please do inform your ward councillors when there is a problem, because otherwise we assume all is going well. And I just happen to be in a street, Albert Road by the station, where we have just not had a problem. So we need to know where there is a problem.
Thanks, Martin. I suppose I should interject that it's, you may know this, but for anyone here who's listening who doesn't know, that there's a very easy to use reporting form on the website, on the council website. If you just search it up, it's very easy to report a miscollection. And if it's more than 24 hours since, you may want to actually just email your councillors and get them involved. Certainly, I know we'd all be very keen to pick this up, because every instance, then we can take it forwards and make sure that those things are dealt with.
Yeah, I mean, and when you fill the form in, it says your missed bin will be collected within 2 to 3 working days, which I know is not happening in many cases, which is causing a lot of frustration, partly because of the volume of issues that are clearly there. But some things are getting worked through. So we've had some examples where there were keys that need to be handed from one team to another team, and that people weren't aware of that, and that's helped with some of the flats that were having some issues. So some things are now getting tackled and improved, but I think the more we hear about it, then we know what's happening actually on the streets, and we can keep feeding it back, and we will do that.
There's an absolute determination to make this not only as good as, but much better than the service we had before. And of course, we should say there are plans for, a new fleet and lots of new things that are going to be coming down the line. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's correct. The old battered fleet that Veolia were using is not being used. So they've been hiring in vehicles while the new purpose designed fleet is being built. It's been a little held up by COVID, but we're expecting to see the new vehicles starting to arrive in the autumn, and there will be training involved, but that should make things better. And for instance, the feeling that sometimes the food waste is going in with the general waste, that should be less of a problem. As the new vehicles, it will be a very different place where it goes onto the vehicle, so that the operatives will not be tempted to put 2 things into one place. But yes, there'll be super vehicles.
Okay, so Mr. Wardle, do you have a last thought before we move on?
Yeah, as I say, it's probably not the process, but it's more the execution of it, and that I think is the heart of this. And waste collection, people leaving debris on the side of the road is really the issue here, not super duper vans and people collecting 2 days after they should do. I think this is more around sort of leaving it like we've been complaining about the parks, if I'm honest. So I'll leave that with you guys to.
We've already heard through our comms from the new chair of the Environment Committee, who has apologised for the issues which everybody has faced. As Jim says, it is something that we are determined to get to tackle and make sure that the new contractor is delivering the service that they should be delivering to residents. Okay, right, so now Craig Nunn, this one is for Hampton Wick councillors only. Is Craig still here?
Hello, yes, that's me.
Hey, Craig, hello.
Yeah, so we've learned a lot during the course of the pandemic. One of the things we have learned is the importance of staying fit and healthy, and in particular, maintaining a healthy respiratory system. So it was very encouraging to see that the level of motorised traffic in the ward reduced, particularly for those living near Kingston Roundabout and near Hampton Wick High Street. Sadly, though, since the restrictions have been lifted, the level of traffic has increased dramatically, and the level of pollution has risen pretty much back to the levels, the unacceptable levels that residents had to suffer prior to lockdown. So my question is are the councillors aware of the level of pollution, in particular particulate pollution and nitrogen dioxide, whether those levels comply with World Health Organization limits, and regardless of the answers to that question, whether steps are being taken to address what I consider to be unacceptable levels of pollution in and around that area, and other areas of the ward for that matter.
Okay, so Robin, Jim, this is a question directly related to Hampton Wick, but if there are other councillors who wish to, because it's again, it's one of these universal issues. So,
well, shall I kick off about the high street, but there may be others who are more qualified on air pollution to chip in. But I think if you look at air pollution stats across the borough as a whole, you can very much see the concentration of where the air pollution is highest is all the way along the road network, as you would expect. And then you're going to get concentrations where there's traffic build up. And, ever since I've been here, and it's not got any better, recently, Hampton Wick High Street has been a bit of a nightmare in terms of the traffic that backs up all along it. And clearly that's true, particularly when you get into the winter and you get towards Christmas time. I don't know what the answer is to trying to stop that happening. I mean, what I do know is in the long-term plan, from an infrastructure point of view, is that the Kingston Roundabout needs to be looked at. I have to say that's been looked at particularly from a safety point of view, because it's not a great junction for cyclists. So there's definitely plans to look at the junction there. Whether that's going to help with traffic, I don't know, because of course a lot of it is really backing up from Kingston. In reality, we're sitting there as a sort of waiting lane for Kingston half the time. I'd be interested to know what your views are if you're down the end of the ward about the Kingston Bridge lane closures, because clearly they've been done by Kingston Council with the intention of helping cycling walking over the bridge, but they've had the effect of closing one of the lanes either way. And I'm now seeing increasing traffic queues, probably more than there would otherwise be, queuing to get over the bridge from our side and queuing to come back on the other side as well. So I haven't really answered your question about what we can do about it, because I've heard of various thoughts about actually tackling the root of the problem by going and talking to Kingston Council about how people are queuing to get into the car parks in Kingston, and it's all backing up into our area. But it's quite a complex traffic management problem to try and see how you could actually deal with that sensibly.
I suppose there is. Oh, go ahead, Craig. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I'm a cyclist myself, and I think in trying to fix one problem, the lane closure over the bridge has created another one, which is more congestion Hampton Wick side of the bridge. So, I reluctantly would be in favour of lifting that restriction now, but it doesn't ultimately get to the root cause of the problem, which is just too much motorised traffic.
Yes, I suppose to add to what Robin said just quickly, that the issue of air quality has been taken very seriously by the council, and it is part of strategies that others here might be able to comment on more. But and part of the long-term approach is to try and encourage modal shift to make cycling and walking more attractive. But obviously, as the number of it is this backup from Kingston. I think the other thing, looking at what we can do to try to ensure that what's been alluded to earlier, the benefits of traffic not being in Bushy Park is wonderful for the park, for the wildlife in the park, and for the users of the park. But I think all councillors surrounding the park are concerned to ensure that we monitor what effects that might have during the trial on increased traffic levels elsewhere. And you know, we have to be clear with the parks that that is a very important consideration.
Okay, Monica, did you want to come in?
Good evening. I'm actually wear lots of hats where active travel is concerned, Craig. So I'm involved in a group called Make Air Safe and Clean, which operates in South West London, on the Active Travel Advisory Group, and as well as Living Streets, London Living Streets, Richmond Cycling Campaign, and on the Air Quality Transport Committee. As far as Hampton Wick High Street is concerned, I don't know the most up-to-date information for NO2, for nitrogen dioxide, but it certainly exceeded the WHO legal limits, which are 40 milligrams per square cubic, whatever, and was 45. As far as particulates is concerned, especially 2.5, PM 2.5, there is no safe limit, basically, as far as WHO is concerned. I think the problem is really, now that people aren't using public transport, is a key issue now, and it's understandable. And that was why TfL, Streetscape money and DFT was thrown at councils, not thrown at, but certainly encouraged to put in various schemes to kind of counteract that car-dominated recovery. The issue is that obviously TfL have lost huge amounts of money, all the various schemes that were in there for TfL. I mean, TfL's basically bankrupt, and the money that's come down from DFT and TfL is nowhere near what would have been available. It's still very, very short of what would have been available. I think just generally, yes, we do have an air quality action plan. Things kind of got a bit put on hold. The bottom line is, and I think all the evidence points to the fact that you have that, not just encouraging, actually enabling and prioritising walking and cycling, and obviously public transport is the answer, because not everyone's going to be able to walk and cycle and use public transport all the time. But in order to release up space on the network, you have to encourage people to modal shift. And how you do that is through disincentives for motor vehicles. That's the only way that it actually works. And there's evidence, massive evidence across the world for that to happen. So in terms of what action we can take, I mean, a lot of that is dependent on, obviously, whether it's a TfL road, financial implications, and also political. It's a political issue, to be honest. That's all I can say, yeah.
Okay. Craig, does that satisfy you for the time being? If there is detailed points.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that the most important thing for me is to raise awareness of the fact that the air we are breathing, we are all breathing, is unacceptably polluted in this area, and and very happy to recognise that it's a difficult thing to fix, but we have to try to fix it.
I think that's a really good point, and it's really important for us as ward councillors to hear that and to make it very clear and to start to try to shift this perception that any sort of, as what Monica referred to as disincentives, or any incentives that are trying to improve air quality aren't about a sort of ideological clobbering of car users, but actually it's our duty to represent those people who live along these roads. And it's, you know, it is inconvenient sometimes for car users, but it also massively impacts the health of those people who are living in our communities. We're not on motorways. These are communities, and it's very important to get this side across. So thank you for bringing that up.
Can I just add one last? Can I just add one last thing?
Very quickly, Monica, so I want to get through some more questions. Because
you know I will keep on at this till the cows go home. But basically, you remember that there was the case of the 9-year-old girl who lived on the South Circular who died a few years ago because she had so many asthma attacks. Something like 20 odd hospital admissions in 3 years. Now that's come back and going through the judicial process. If that's found to be in her favour, that the air pollution was the cause of her death, that could actually open up some very interesting legal opportunities to do something. So we're all waiting and watching.
If I could have a quick word.
If it's quick, Jonathan, then
very quick.
There are questions.
Yeah, no. So one of the things that we've been doing as a cyclist, I would prefer we were promoting cycling, but we're also promoting the shift to electric cars with electric charging points, etc. And particularly when it comes to their nitrogen dioxide and so on, the electric cars do make a difference in terms of price and so on. And we're also pushing tree planting, and through the planning process we've been putting green roofs, etc., which make a difference on a very tight area like the High Street in Hampton Wick, but does make a difference on the broader issue of air pollution.
Okay, thank you so much. We're now going to move straight to Sean, who wants to ask a question about the future of the Landmark Arts Centre.
Thank you. Those of you on here that know me know that I am actually a trustee of the Landmark Arts Centre, so I probably know more about the future, or lack of it actually, than some. But I just wanted to use this opportunity to thank anybody in the Teddington area that has, and further afield, that has donated to our campaign to save the landmark, because we've had over 800 donations to our fund, and we're enormously grateful, because without that we would not be open at the moment, or stand a chance of opening in the future, because we have had no funding from anywhere on a national or local level. For all sorts of reasons we haven't qualified. So without the support of the local community, we would lose this community asset for good. And the operating conditions at the moment for the arts sector are enormously difficult. And so while retail and hospitality is sort of gradually getting back to normal, or the new normal, for the arts sector, we are still very much, in some respects, in lockdown. So it's just to remind people of that, and to say thank you for all your support so far, and to sort of just encourage people to, when we are able to put things on, to come and make use of the centre. So at the moment, for the next 3 weekends, we do have a socially distanced art exhibition, and we've gone to huge efforts to make sure that it's COVID safe. And it'll be a big experiment for us to see if we can operate in this way. So just a bit of a plug really for the centre, but also in the Woodland we've got a sculpture exhibition for the very first time, and I just wanted to say thank you again to the council for the funding that we had to get the Woodland into shape a few years back. That's really helped us transform that space, and that's now paying dividends in this particular environment. So back to front, but save the landmark.
It's come out on mine the right way around.
And it's just one last point. We are very keen to tap into the local fund for any support that might be available there, because as I'm reiterating, we haven't been able to tap into any of the other funds that are available. We are going to the Arts Council for their pot, but we're not holding out much hope for that either.
John, can I urge you to apply for the Community Engagement Fund?
The council?
Yes, there's a ward community engagement fund which councillors have the ability to distribute in the wards, and you'd be able to apply for it.
I'll talk to you more about that offline, I think.
I think so. What we will do, Sean, if you don't mind, is if you can send community engagement team details of all of the stuff that you've got on, and the fundraising base, that's particularly important, how people who are feeling flush at the moment can slip you a £5, then yes, or more. Then we'll add that to the information which is going to go out to all people who've tuned in this evening. How does that sound?
That sounds fantastic. And, you know, it's such a shame that when we're supposed to be celebrating our 25th birthday this year. And in fact, actually, we're contemplating that we might have to close for good. And just to remind the community what a terrible eyesore, you know, St Albans had become. And so those people that remember those times will remember the big campaign to save it. So we're really grateful that everyone's sort of stepped up to the mark again.
Okay.
To mean that we are still going to be there for the future.
Good.
Absolutely. And it's, you know, it's a hugely valued part of our community. And I think the key thing is you've got this far with community support. And I'm pleased that on the podcast, I should do a quick plug, Gareth, for the
yes, of course.
Talk Richmond, our new podcast, which is a new way to get information from the council. It's fantastic. Or I can't really say that I'm the host, but anyway, it's intended to be fantastic. And obviously we started on a high note with a fascinating interview in our first episode with Gareth Roberts himself. So we're looking to do an episode really soon on the issue of Save the Arts. As an actor myself, I know how very difficult it is for all the theatres and spaces. And the Landmark, we're hoping to have an interview with someone from the Landmark to talk about this. And I'm aware the key thing is now what you do to survive past September, and to not let people think that we're out of the woods yet with this, because we're really not. And it's too good and too valuable a space for us to let slip away. And I think I'm very proud of our Teddington and Hampton Wick community, who are very good at stepping up. They know that, you know, you use it or lose it. And I hope everyone makes an effort to go down and take part in your events. Check out the sculptures, they're really fantastic. And good luck to you.
Good. Thank you very much for that. And we are now going to move on to Mr. Mark, Dr. Dorgan, if I remember my correspondence. And Dr. Dorgan, are you available? Let me just have a quick look. Some people do, you know, go offline. Unfortunately, it looks as though Dr. Dorgan has gone, so we will try to find out, get him an email. So we move to, is it Mariah Mauchi? Mara, sorry.
That's all right.
I was looking at that one thinking, which one is it? Is it going to be Mariah or Mara?
No,
there we go.
I've got my first and surnames together on my profile, so as soon as this meeting's over, I'll change that. Thank you for taking my question. So we've had some very localised crime going on our street, and I'm just wondering if it's a wider issue, particularly around bike theft. So my bike was stolen from my lock shed at home a couple of weeks ago, and the police, we had a street meeting with the police. But from talking to friends and neighbours, I gather that it's quite a major problem in Teddington. And the government has these various initiatives to encourage cycling, which in many respects is good for physical health, climate change and so on. But if lots of new bikes or newly fixed up bikes with this £50 voucher from the government then go missing, it's just going to be a bonanza for thieves. So yeah. Just really wanted to hear if it's a wider problem or if it's very localised to where we are.
Okay, who fancies having a go at this? I can step in and assist if required. Is that you, Jonathan? You're in semi-darkness there. It's very difficult.
It's an environmentally efficient light bulb that only gives me enough light to read things. So the level of crime we have in this area is generally very low. But it is disproportionately certain things such as the theft of bicycles and the theft of bicycles from sheds and the theft of very high value bicycles. So there are certain bits of advice that the police have given on this which may or may not be relevant in your case. One is that the value of the lock you're using should be proportional to the value of the bicycle. And there are some people who've had thousands of pounds worth of bicycle with a lock that can be snipped open relatively easily. So that's one bit of it. Another bit is that particularly when it comes to sheds, it depends on how easily accessed that shed is to people who can nip down side entrances and side alleys. And particularly if your shed is something which people can reach by going down a side alley and over maybe one fence, investing in what they call alley gating. So if you've got an alleyway that's half a dozen or a dozen properties share, then getting a gate at the end of that alley can significantly improve the security for the sheds on that, and also the risk of burglary on there. So this is cycle thefts are one of the highest crimes in this area, in an otherwise relatively low crime area. And the other thing is they do a bicycle marking system, which is, particularly if you've got a valuable bike, it is worth getting it marked on that system. And if it is marked, then and they recover a stolen bike, they've got a chance of catching people, prosecuting people, and also getting bikes back to people. So improve the security of your individual bike, of your shed, and also mark the bike. Hope that helps. Sorry to hear about the theft.
Yeah, thank you very much. I did have my bike on the bike register. And that's what really useful advice. It was really, my concern is more a sort of systemic thing. If there are sort of gangs of criminals hoovering up bikes all over the borough, there's only sort of so much individuals can do. But maybe I'm imagining that it's a lot worse than it is, because if crime generally is low, then it sounds like I was just unlucky, and it's not too bad. And
there's an element of bad luck. We do have relatively low crime. I'm sure Gareth can give us a more up-to-date thing on this, but we've tended to be one of the lowest crime, if not usually one of the lowest crime boroughs. There have been times when the level of crime in this borough, particularly at this end of the borough, is actually below the national average, not just below the London average, which is really quite impressive. But what crime we have, a lot of it is opportunistic. So people are going down rows of cars, and eventually they find one that isn't locked. They're going around looking for back alleys and looking for access to sheds that they can get to with breaking maybe one padlock, or relatively easy to get into things. I was dealing with one of my ward sergeants a few years back, who on her sort of second day in the second week in the ward said to me she'd been walking around a couple of particular side roads, and the number of open windows and open doors she'd seen, this was obviously a low crime area, quote. And I'm sure all ward councillors, from our experience in delivering political leaflets, have encountered open front doors, and I've had to ring the bell and hand over somebody's keys that they've left in the outside of their lock before now. This is a relatively low crime area, but bicycles, particularly valuable bicycles stored in sheds that can be found down alleys, are one of the crimes that takes place.
Yeah, it's one of those issues, because it's always a difficult conversation to have regarding how people secure their property, because it always feels as though it's going to lapse into the to the realm of victim blaming, and nobody's doing that. But Jonathan's quite right. What we have is the safest borough in London in terms of violent crime and stuff like that. We have just lost our edge during the pandemic on just being the overall safest borough in London. And it's usually what the police rather laboriously call acquisitive crime. So theft either from houses, from cars, or from sheds. What I would urge everybody on this call to do, and we will put the link in the thing, is we've now just invested a whole heap load of money into a thing called Online Watch Link, OWL. Now you can get the details of this from the council website, and it's like an online neighbourhood watch resource. So the thing is, the more people are keeping an eye out, the less crime that happens. And what you also need to do, and there's loads of information from the police who will happily give you details about what you can do to make your property less appealing to your average burglar. I mean, I was once told by one of our neighbourhood sergeants that that really what you need to do is to make your house look less appealing. This is awful. Make your house look less appealing than your next door neighbours, because your burglar will go for the easier option. It's a really horrible thing to say, but this is the part of where we live now. So unfortunately, acquisitive crime is an issue. but by taking the correct preventative precautions, we can all do our bit. But I do everybody register for online WatchLink, because hopefully that will have a real impact and a real difference. I'm going to take one final question. Before we wrap up. This is from Mr. Mark Lawson. I'm just checking to see if he is still on the call. He is still on the call. It's to do with COVID. It's the new scones versus scones. So, Mr. Lawson, would you like to ask a question? It's about face masks on buses.
Yeah, I get buses a lot, sometimes going into the borough of Kingston, but I just wanted to ask whether the council can put any pressure onto the bus companies with regard to non-compliance of face masks. So what I'm finding is probably only 10 to 15% of people on the buses are not wearing face masks. I understand the bus drivers aren't asking them. I'm getting into a bit of trouble sometimes raising it, which is clearly not a good idea, because the people who aren't wearing masks tend to be slightly troublesome. So I just wanted to know whether the council, because I think we're all in this together, and I don't think this thing's going to go away. And that was really my point, really. It's very frustrating getting on buses, wearing a mask yourself and finding one or two, and we know that they're limiting the numbers. I think it's 14 on a lower deck bus and about 33 on a double decker. So it's always going to be 1, 2, maybe 5 if it's a big bus. But can you apply any pressure, or is it Mayor Khan, or is it just not going to happen?
Okay, who fancies taking a tilt at this one? We may be able to get one more question in if the answer is brief.
Well, I mean, I guess what I would say is Gareth has been doing a fine job communicating through all the council videos on why people should wear masks, but Gareth may be better placed to comment. I mean, short of the communication and PR work that we're doing and encouraging people, I'm not sure we've got an enforcement role on the buses themselves that we could apply. You know, and I guess
one on there, I can see that. It's very good.
Yep. The police have the powers, but so I think all we can do is the encouragement and the PR and keep mentioning it. There you are. There he is. Yep. Can't do blow football with that, Gareth, can you?
No, absolutely not. It is what we can all do is take personal responsibility for our own actions. Yes, there are going to be some people who will not wear a mask for whatever reason, and they are just appalling. There are people who either cannot or aren't required to wear masks because of they have a special exemption. I think that the thing which we have to do is take responsibility for our own actions and look after ourselves in terms of what we're doing. If we do the right thing, it will hopefully encourage others to do the same.
Quite right.
There you go. Props. So we have one final question now. I don't know whether Councillor Ellingorn will need to close his ears on this one, as it is regarding a live planning matter, but it is one which I've had a lot of correspondence from. I can't do anything on this, folks. You keep sending me your emails, but I can't involve myself in planning issues in the neighbouring ward. So, Martin, do you need to sort of turn your volume down for this bit?
It depends what it is.
It's the Notting Hill Genesis site at St Clair's Business Park.
Yeah, I think I ought to.
Okay, so
Jonathan also needs to close.
No, Jonathan is predetermined.
I'm predetermined.
As this is such a big issue, which has attracted a lot of attention, and this is to be a live debate about current issues. Mr. Donald and Martin, turn your volume down.
All right.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Hello. Thank you for taking my question.
Not at all.
We've obviously had consultation with Notting Hill, and I appreciate it's a live, ongoing matter, so you're restricted what you can and can't say. But what we're very worried as a neighbourhood and as a village, etc., is the absolute, in our eyes, and most of the residents in the area, the absolute ignoring of what Notting Hill Genesis have done. Every time we've had a consultation, they've avoided any of our questions and any of the flyers. Anything negative has been pushed to one side, what they perceive as negative. We obviously had their initial consultation happen at Christmas, but we felt was slightly dubious. And now they've gone forward with the full planning application in a time when obviously our voices are highly restricted and, you know, we can't put ourselves actually at meetings or whatever. We are extremely concerned as a resident, as neighbourhoods, etc., that there is a very large proposed development going on in a very small village area. And we just need some sort of reassurance that our voice has been heard. I appreciate planning applications have to go through a process, but we just feel we have been muted very cleverly by our new proposed neighbours, shall we say, and just want to know what the council is able to allow us to have in these times that allows us to actually have a voice when these go to planning.
Okay, I'm going to ask Jonathan to come in on this one and to just give a very quick update on what the council can consider when it comes to decide. It's not a popularity contest, is it?
I want to cover two things aspects of this. Firstly, I chair the planning committee, and almost as soon as we were legally allowed to, we moved to video conference meetings. So the meetings are online. Residents can come in by video conference as you're doing now. We've also got backup options such as telephone conference facilities for those who can't do video. So far, we haven't had a member of the public have to use that to speak at planning, but we have had 2 members of the planning committee who were only able to join us by telephone conference. So in that sense, I think you're right, and the way that we're running the planning process have been as strong in this era as when we were all meeting in one room. If anything, it's actually stronger because now we've got various fail-safe fallback options, such as if you can't do telephone, you can't do video, you can even give your speech to a member of Democratic Services who will make that speech for you. You've also got the option of speaking with ward councillors, etc. So in that sense, I think we're covered. On the specific things about this particular application, I'm dealing with this as a ward councillor rather than the planning chair, because I have taken a particular view against this application. So I will not be sitting at the table when it goes to planning. I will be one of the people who's speaking against the application. And in my view, there are a number of problems with it, including it's unneighbourly and overbearing to certain key neighbours, etc. But I appreciate if Councillor Ellingorn is still on the thing, he probably wants to drop out of this before hearing this because he would not want to render himself predetermined. But Monica, Matthew and I, the 3 councillors for Fulwell and Hampton Hill, have had a number of meetings with neighbouring residents in Holly Road, and a lot of communication with people in School Road now, and also with people in Windmill Road, and other neighbours. Penny Farthing Mews, which is a new construction around the back of the High Street, and whose gardens are absolutely next to this. We have I have been to I've visited people around multiple sites of this and had people point out to me various potential problems with this application. Yes, I share your concern that I have been also in meetings with Notting Hill Genesis on more than one occasion where we've made sensible suggestions to them, and I don't see huge changes taking place to this application as a result of that. I've had other meetings with other developers over the years where a little bit of suggestion, suddenly things get turned around so that it's much less intrusive on neighbours and etc. And I can think of one development at the other end of the ward where the result of a chat with the developer, instead of people's the new development having windows looking into the windows of York Road 15 yards away, they had a lovely view across the allotments on the other side of the road. That sort of thing can happen when you get a developer who is willing to amend their scheme, and I don't see so many amendments taking place from Notting Hill Genesis on there so far.
Monica. Monica, you've frozen. Do you wish to come in and say?
I don't know. No, just to reiterate, Ian, what Jonathan's just said, we have been meeting with I suppose a smallish group, but certainly representatives from all the surrounding roads, and we've been doing that virtually and by email to share our concerns and how we're going to represent those concerns at the planning meeting when it comes forward for the agenda. So just to sort of reassure you that your voice will be heard. Obviously, you're quite entitled to register to speak when it comes up on the agenda, and you'll be connected virtually to that. So if you want, I recognise your name. I know you've emailed us. So if you want to speak, do let us know, and then we can let you know as soon as it's as soon as we know that it's going to be discussed, and you can register to do that. If
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. The important thing to remember is that anybody who is going to lodge an objection with the planning committee needs to come up with planning reasons why something can't happen. As I mentioned at the very beginning, councillors on the planning committee can't treat it as a popularity contest. So I used to be on the planning committee, and we would get applications or objections to the application, which would say there have been over 150 people who are objected to this. Well, yes, that's fine, but we do need to have the planning reasons why something should be refused, not just weight of public opinion. It's a really painful process, but I'm sure that Jonathan and Monica and Matthew will be delighted to give guidance as to what they consider to be planning reasons why something should either be supported or rejected. Okay, so now, Councillor Ellingbourne, you can come back to us. You can turn your volume back up. It's like, for those of us of a certain age, it's like Mr. and Mrs. Martin's now going to come in and answer the same question. No, he's not. So what it only leaves for me to do this evening, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, is to thank everybody who has taken part. It has been very interesting. We've gone slightly over time, but I think that last question was of interest to many people on the call. So it leaves me just to say thank you to our communications team and our community engagement team, who have thrown all of this together, and they've kept it all on the road for the last hour and 45 minutes, Zoom past. I would like to thank the councillors who have taken part. That's Councillor Brown, Councillor Woodcock, Councillor Millard, Councillor Cardy, Councillor Saunders, Councillor Ellingbourne. Not missed anybody off there, I don't think.
Councillor Hull.
Is Matthew on the call?
Yeah.
I didn't see Matthew. I think he sort of snuck in at the back late, which is always the best way. I would like to thank, valiant attendance from Councillor Piers Allen, who attended to answer questions about Ellery Hall, of which there were none. But I'm sure that he will be on hand to answer them if you so wish at a later date. Those people who didn't get round to answering your question, we will do our best to email you and get you a response that way, because you've had the good taste to wait. We should have the good taste to offer you answers. So thank you to the teams for doing this. Thank you to the councillors for their contribution. But as always, on matters such as these, the thanks goes chiefly to yourselves. Good night.